I'm not shy about dying on camera at all. And there are some people who have this approach like, your character can never die. I'm like, give me as much death on cinema as humanly possible. I love the idea that when someone comes to see a film I'm in, there's a reasonable chance that I'm not going to be there at the end. Hi, I'm Eric Bana, and this is the timeline of my career.
What'd you get to on the weekend, mate?
Well, I did a bit of gardening and I had dinner with my parents. How about you?
Oh, I got pissed Friday, woke up Monday.
Full Frontal was an Australian sketch comedy program, I guess very similar to Saturday Night Live. It was just the hugest break of my career, going from stand-up, touring around Australia in a Tarago van with a bunch of other comedians to then performing on this highly anticipated sketch comedy show. I had dreamed of doing sketch comedy, not really of anything beyond that. So when I got this job, I have to tell you, to put it in context, I was ready to retire. The thought of working with any of those cast members was like a dream come true. So then when I got the role, I was like, I'm done. Like, this is it. This is the beginning and end of my career. We would shoot 4 days a week. Friday nights was in front of a live audience where we do a lot of the sketches live to tape, a lot of stuff pre-recorded during the week. It was great for writing, it was great for performing, great for friendships. I met my wife in that period of time who was working at the same network. So I look back on that period and it was just a great, really fun, highly adrenalized 4 years of my life.
What would you find on the roof at McDonald's?
Tiles.
No, pickles.
No, I didn't take him to the bloody hospital. Now tell me this, right? Why would I shoot a bloke, bang, and then put him in the bloody car and whiz him off to the hospital at 100 miles an hour? It defeats the purpose of having shot him in the first place.
Bit of mystery for me as to exactly how the casting came about. I know that Chopper Read, when my name was mentioned, didn't immediately say it was a bad idea. In fact, I think his quote was something like, "That guy seems insane enough to play me." And he'd seen some of my characters on Full Frontal and luckily knew who I was, which was a help. It was a lot of time to prep. I was very excited, but obviously, somewhat intimidated because I knew who Chopper Read was. I really felt like I could play him, but I had no idea what the film was going to do or exactly how it would be perceived by the public because he was such a notorious and violent figure. I don't have a massive circle of people that I defer to when it comes to contemplating a role. My ego has to kind of kick in and feel like you are the only person that can play this role. Like I'm waiting for that voice to come down, even though it's not correct. I have to feel that sense of ownership. If I read something and I feel like I can see 30 other people playing that part, which there always is, of course, I'll pass. I'm asking you to believe that I can be that person. I have to believe it myself. And when I read Chopper, I went, yeah, I'll be Chopper. Like, I can do that. I entered the first half of the film at around 90 kilograms. I'm not sure what that is in pounds. And then we had a 4-week hiatus for me to basically get fat. It's not long. It's definitely not long enough. So there was no personal trainer. There was none of this highly scientific. It was just eat as much crap as you can possibly get in your mouth. Over this period of time, I went into the second half of the shoot at 102 and then got up to 106 kilos. So it was about 35 pounds, I think, in the end. It took me more than a month to get rid of that.
I'll give you 20 seconds to produce some cash, or else I'll fucking shoot you. 1, 2,
I've got no
3,
cash, mate.
4,
I told you I've got no.
6,
Listen, you come in,
7,
I fucking
8,
give you drinks.
9.
What's the matter with you?
You don't think we should be here?
You know what I think? It don't really matter what I think. Once that first bullet goes past your head, politics and all that shit just goes right out the window.
After Chopper, I went to America and met a bunch of people, and we did a couple little film festivals with Chopper, and a lot of industry people had seen the film, and there was starting to be a bit of interest. And there was this really small role in Black Hawk Down, which I was offered, which in the end I said yes to, mainly because I had read the book and I loved the story. I'll never forget where I was when I got that phone call, and it was very, very early in the morning here in Australia, and to hear Ridley Scott's voice on the other end of the phone to ask me to come and play Hoot was pretty monumental. I remember that day very, very vividly. I don't recall ever since then getting that kind of like hand of God phone call. So it felt really significant at the time. The agent calling saying, you know, Ridley Scott's going to call you in 5 minutes. I'm like, it's 3 in the morning. People really don't have that worldwide clock on the wall in LA sorted out yet, do you? To this day, it is the most incredible casting of a film that I've been in. The cast was so huge, and when you go through that list now, it's just an absolute joke how many amazing actors are in that film. I met Kim Coates and Nicholas Coster-Waldau and Bill Fichtner through the training process. We formed really tight bonds really quickly, and we were all on the same floor at the hotel in Rabat, Morocco, and the cast was so big that there was like gangs of like 3 to 5 in sort of groups. I remember seeing Ty Burrell and Ewan McGregor playing chess together. Every day. You have the golfers, you'd have the tennis players, the young party animals, like there were all these groupings, and it was just a really incredible time. I was there with an 18-month-old child. So my Morocco experience was a bit different to the other 30 or so people there.
You and I have never had the chance to get to know each other properly. Well, it's because I don't want to get to know you properly or improperly.
The difficult thing about the Hulk for me was getting my head around that kind of massive movie and sort of like your place in it. In hindsight, kind of factually true, I convinced myself that I wasn't the star of the movie and that I was playing the scientist who was the kind of supporting act to this big green guy. I kind of downplayed it in my mind because the thought of playing your first lead role in a big American film was not something that was kind of sitting naturally with me. The Hulk was my longest shoot outside of Australia in America. At the time, there was so much work going around for so many people, particularly of my generation. There were these conversations I'd have with agents and people in LA. They're like, what's your fall movie? I'm like, what's a fall movie? Like, what are you talking about? What's your summer movie? What are you saying that like someone has a movie they do in the winter and a movie they do in the summer and they're like, yeah, that's exactly right. I'm like, well, that explodes my brain. I'll just do a film and then I'll do another film when I find another film that I want to do, sort of thing. So that ended up being like every 12 months because I wanted to come home at the end of the production, get my head right. I really love preparing for a role. Like, I think one of the biggest gifts about our job is that you get ridiculous access to the most incredible people, whether that be, you know, military or science or legal, whatever it is. And if you're not exploiting that to the full degree, you're wasting an opportunity. I looked at some of the older actors whose careers I really loved, and they had a much slower burn rate of film. They had a much lower average. I was able to do a deal with myself mentally that I'd be able to sort of pace myself at that rate. But if I did 3 films a year, I categorically knew I'd be retired at 35.
All my life, I've lived by a code, and the code is simple. Honor the gods, love your woman, and defend your country.
It was interesting when I first met Wolfgang Petersen at his office to talk about Troy. He, spoke about the whole film and then said, which character is it you're interested in? And I said, Hector, like I love the role of Hector. And he's like, you want to play Hector? Great, because everyone wants to play Achilles. I'm like, no, I don't want to play Achilles, I want to play Hector. He's like, good, because Brad wants to play Achilles. So there you go. I just thought Hector was, the most interesting character in the story. I don't know why, I just sort of gravitated. Maybe I just kind of psychologically knew that Brad was going after Achilles. I definitely didn't want to play Paris. Let's put it that way. I knew I didn't want to play Paris. The thing I love most about the film is that, for me, it was pretty much almost all exterior, and I hate being in a studio. So I think, coming from doing The Hulk, even though that film has action, none of it has me in it, right? So I'm playing a scientist in a indoor studio for the whole film, and then you go and do something that's so physical and entirely outdoors in the heat with animals and stuntmen, and it felt very cathartic. There was so much to learn. I'd never really ridden a horse properly before. I'd never done any fight work. The standout memory is how long it took to learn the Hector Achilles fight from beginning to end without ever stopping. And I did that for months and months and months. A couple of days before we were due to shoot that scene in front of the Wall of Troy, we got hit with a hurricane in Mexico and it tore the wall down, and it meant having to jump on a plane and coming home to Australia whilst the crew reassembled the wall. And then we came back to film in front of the wall, and Brad had of course torn his Achilles as Achilles, which meant that I hopped back on a plane, came back to Australia again, waited for Achilles to heal his Achilles so I could go back and fight Achilles in front of the hurricane repaired wall to finally do this fight, which I felt like I'd waited all my life to be killed by Achilles at that stage.
Troy is mother to us all. Fight for her!
Ich will nicht, dass du verletzt wirst.
Verletzt wieso?
If you tell anybody about this, I don't know. Just don't. Just don't.
So now I'm in LA with nothing to do, waiting for a flight to get home, and I get a call that Steven Spielberg wants to meet with me. And I was summoned to an airport in the middle of nowhere where he was filming the Tom Hanks movie Terminal. And I drove out there and had lunch with Steven Spielberg. We had some intel, some pretty good agency intel, that one of the projects he was developing was based on the book Vengeance, which I had read and loved by pure coincidence. There was this, kind of bizarre moment where we were sitting down and I was probably too scared to eat anything, and he started talking about the Munich Olympics, and I was like, oh, thank God it's that project, and I actually know something about this. And at the end of the lunch, he just kind of said, so it'd be great if you would come and play Avner. And I remember driving back from the desert and calling my agent and recalling the conversation. He's like, so he offered you the part? And I was like, I guess he offered me the part. I just couldn't quite get my head around what had just happened. But it turned out that I wasn't hearing things, I wasn't hallucinating out in the desert, and I hadn't done any mushrooms or anything, and that I was being offered the role. And I'm getting to work not only with Steven, but with his crew, which means Janusz Kaminski on camera. And it's the way that Steven works and the way that he worked on that particular project that made it such a special experience. Every camera move, every focus, it always felt like there was this incredible ballet that was occurring that involved everybody. Unless everyone was at the top of their game, the take wouldn't work. Daniel was contemplating James Bond whilst we were filming, and Steve and I were getting in his ear like, dude, you have to play James Bond. There was a scene in Munich where Daniel and I are storming a private villa in the middle of the night, and it was right at the point where Daniel had to make a decision about whether he was going to play Bond and Daniel and I have to jump over a fence and kind of creep through the grass and approach this house. And Steven got a Bluetooth speaker out, and on action he played the Bond theme during the take, and we climbed the fence to the James Bond theme and came through the bushes and were running down the road whilst the music was playing, and then he yelled cut, and Daniel was like, you bastard, what are you doing? It was so much fun. It was a good challenge trying to keep a straight face, but yeah.
You go back to the same places a lot.
Yeah, it's like gravity. Big events pull you in.
I was a big event.
So it would seem.
The biggest gift for any actor's career is having the ability to do different things. If you're lucky enough to be in that position, you absolutely have to do that, and you can't just keep doing the same things. With Time Traveler's Wife, the fact that I was in the conversation to play Henry de Tamble was amazing to me, and I love Rachel McAdams and think she's an incredible actress, and to know that she was cast as Claire and wanted me to consider playing Henry meant a lot. I had never done a romance movie before, and so was up for the challenge. I love the idea that when someone comes to see a film I'm in, there's a reasonable chance that I'm not going to be there at the end. It just makes things more interesting, right? If you know that every time you see a certain actor in a film that they're going to be there at the end when the credits roll and that song plays, it's just not as interesting. I've had very different deaths in my films, and The Time Traveler's Wife is probably the most bizarre one because it's kind of like dealing with various time jumps and it's in the future, but it's in the present, and it's a bit sort of a bit harder to get your head around, I think.
I tried to prepare you for what your life would be.
You didn't prepare me for this.
Run.
I loved it straight away, and the script was really interesting and had this wonderful balance between drama and action. And I thought it was really beautiful. You know, I'm a dad myself with two kids, and I have a daughter, and there's something special about Saoirse and my working relationship in that film. It just felt completely natural. I think her decision making is the best of anyone in her generation in terms of her career, but she was just the most incredible young kid. It's one of the films that had the most impact on me in terms of the finished product being elevated by its kind of sense of taste from the director and the music, and that synergy, and the editing I thought was really beautiful. It's one of the exciting things about being a supporting role instead of the lead, is that the first time you see the film, there's so much that you haven't seen before that, you know, you're a genuine audience member. I think it's really important to play smaller characters if that's a possibility, and not just lock yourself into the idea that, okay, well, because of where I am in my career, every role must be a leading role, otherwise how will that be perceived? I've loved it when I found those supporting characters, and they're a lot of fun, and there's less pressure, and you're not holding as much responsibility in terms of the moral compass of the story and all those sort of things, and so it can be quite invigorating, and you're away from home less.
Hey, what's going on? You all right?
She's fine. Can you just go? We are having a private conversation.
Were you looking through that, or was she?
She was.
Can you just let us have a private conversation?
Who told you could do that?
When I was approached for Dirty John, the script wasn't yet written, but the podcast existed. And so I listened to the podcast and just thought it was absolutely incredible. Connie Britton had already been attached to play Deborah, and I was a huge fan of Connie's work. So that was the conversation starter. Here's a piece of material, here's your co-star, here is this insane character of John. And I just found him so pathetic and so perplexing and so interesting in all the wrong ways. I felt like this was a character for me. The biggest dilemma of playing Dirty John was knowing I could never, ever again wear cargo shorts. And I'm approaching the age where cargo shorts may be a good option for me. I actually ran into someone in the park when I got back. This woman was like really kind of thrown by how sort of too similar to my casual wear Dirty John was, you know, like just t-shirts and polo shirts and shorts and jeans and stuff. It was like not enough of a departure from my dog walking gear to make anyone feel at ease. The interesting thing about playing John was that, like, normally I shed my character over a period of time. When that character is then exposed to the public, it's kind of like you relive it. It was the only time when I really felt the physical reaction to playing a character. Like, there were people that just couldn't look me in the eye when that show went to air. And I mean people I know really, really well. And it took quite a while for people I know, you know, even at my local cafe and stuff, to feel really comfortable just kind of like talking to me again. It was really weird. The show had some kind of an effect on people, which is great, you know, and there was obviously a lot of really, really good positive work that storyline could do for a lot of people and start a lot of conversations. So I'm happy to help facilitate that. It just meant that there were a lot of people crossing the road when they saw me for quite a while when it went to air in Australia.
So you've heard some stories about me.
I've heard some.
I have personal history with the girl who died in a river 20 years ago.
There's a connection between the deaths.
It felt amazing to be able to find the dry and be part of the team that was going to bring it to life. I loved Jane Harper's book. I thought it was absolutely incredible, and I felt this incredible sense of protectiveness of the material and of the character of Aaron Falk. The interesting thing about The Dry, like everyone's like, well, what was it like to film at home? It's like, I haven't woken up in my own bed and gone to work in 21 years, and this was no different. We were 4 or 5 hours out of Melbourne, so to me, I was just on location. It was kind of no different to any other film. I really love working on location. I love being away. I love the lack of distraction. We had an incredible crew. We were filming in a really remote part of the state to really get that sense of character in the town that's in the book. And it's the real Australia. It's not the outback. It's the Australia that we as Australians relate to, that regional experience, which I think Americans will relate to that as well. It's like, how do you relate to your country? Do you relate to it through small country towns or the Grand Canyon or something like that? You relate to it by how you connect in reality, and so The Dry really reflects that in Australia. I had so much more time up my sleeve because I wasn't prepping an accent. It kind of made me mad that we don't get to be Australian more often. It really is kind of ridiculous, you know, that there are so many movies that you never ever hear an Australian accent in. But we're going to work on that. You're going to have to sharpen your ears and tune into some Australian accents. At some point, you're going to have to take that leap. You Americans,